episode. The death of Jean Cole is a harbinger of a terrifying outbreak, a fungal infection that attacks the respiratory system, causing horrendous symptoms. At Olive View Hospital, Michelle Benton's doctors have been fighting to keep her alive with excruciating treatments and tests. And finally, the wait is over. The killer appears. Michelle joins patient zero, Jean Cole, in the valley fever outbreak.
It takes a week or two to actually grow the fungus out. The icing on the cake was when we finally grew the organism out of the sputum and could be absolutely certain about it.
When it gets to the spinal cord, it turns into a syndrome called cocci-meningitis or coccidioidal meningitis. And untreated, the mortality is essentially 100%.
We didn't know what cocci was. No one had ever heard of it before. The doctor said they didn't think she would make it to her 30th birthday, and that was a hard blow. It was, what am I going to do without my sister? So it was rough.
Michelle is not contagious, so she's removed from isolation. But the real battle for this single mother has just begun.
Fungi or funguses or yeasts or molds are particularly difficult to treat because it turns out that the fungus cell is actually very similar to our own cells, so that anything that kills a fungal cell may have a lot of toxicity on human cells.
With few options, doctors begin to treat Michelle with the powerful antifungal medication, fluconazole. If she does not respond quickly, she will face a grim prognosis. Working together, the Department of Health and CDC investigators desperately search for the cause of this outbreak. Dr. Feldman believes the timing is no coincidence.
The hypothesis was that it was tied to the earthquake. That's what we set up to prove. The coccidioidomycosis lives in the ground. Now, the spores are dormant until they're released. So you can be living in an area that has valley fever and never get a case unless the earth is moved and these spores are brought up into the air.
The first step was to map the locations of known victims relative to the epicenter of the quake. Then, by looking at satellite images and wind direction, investigators can track the killer's movement.
We were able to put everything together and determine that the dust clouds generated by the landslides were a major factor in getting valley fever after the earthquake.
Next, investigators must determine how large the impact is and how many people have been affected. Once airborne, valley fever spores can travel up to 500 miles. If the epidemic breached the border of the valley, millions could be at risk.
There was an awful lot of legwork going out, interviewing patients. Where were you when the earthquake occurred? Where were you subsequently? What else were you doing?
We don't really have a good appreciation of the total number of people who are infected. And the only way you would know is by getting them to do a skin test that will show whether they've had exposure.
The CDC monitors and tracks deadly diseases across the U.S. When an outbreak occurs, detailed information about testing and treatment is sent to hospitals at the local level.
We put the word out by fax, phone, letter, email. It gets there, and then they are obligated to develop a plan in response to what's going on.
In less than 2 months, there are over 200 cases of valley fever reported. Investigators hope that early testing and detection will save lives. At Olive View Hospital, Michelle has endured weeks of horror. The infection has spread throughout her entire body.
They were saying that they didn't think Michelle was going to make it, that this was one of the most advanced cases that they had ever seen.
And the antifungal drug fluconazole is not working.
One of the difficulties with treating fungal infections is that there really are a limited number of antifungal medications that are available.
In an effort to save this single mother's life, doctors are forced to use a dangerous drug, the option of last resort.
Amphotericin B is quite a toxic drug that is associated with a lot of side effects.
The treatments are excruciatingly painful. To get the medication into her brain, Michelle must endure injections directly into her skull.
You take a needle, which is about an inch and a half long, and you put the needle right in here. You have to be careful because the brain is pretty close to that.
Michelle had to go through that every other day and become violently ill for something that's supposed to make her feel better.
They have severe shaking chills. And then for the next 3 or 4 hours, the patient has severe nausea and vomiting.
Michelle must endure this protocol and its horrendous side effects for weeks. But as painful as it is, it's now the only alternative to an excruciating death. A terrifying outbreak of valley fever has claimed lives and destroyed others. Michelle Benton endures painful injections into her skull to keep the invasive fungus at bay.
She was so exhausted, and then you could see her almost losing the will. I just can't imagine anyone having to endure that.
Only the thought of her young son keeps this single mother strong. Finally, after weeks of painful treatment, the fungal infection begins to abate. She's not cured, but she regains her strength, and after 4 months is finally able to return to her life.
They did treat me with amphotericin B, which is also called amphoterrible, because it's a horrible, horrible, horrible drug. We don't know how strong we are until we have to deal with something so hard. Everybody might surprise themselves at how well they'll do.
She's a walking miracle. Walking miracle.
For Michelle, valley fever will be with her for life, and it could activate again at any time. Today, Michelle must take daily doses of medication to keep the invasive fungus at bay. And despite this horrifying prospect, Michelle remains positive.
We have a choice every day to live or not to live. I chose to live, and I chose to be who I'm designed to be, as opposed to being a sick victim. I chose to grab a hold of my destiny as a mother and really take care of my child.
As the dust settles in the aftermath of the earthquake, the valley fever epidemic gradually recedes. This violent fungal monster goes back to sleep. Deadly pathogens take advantage of both natural and man-made disasters, preying on mankind in its darkest hours. For the CDC, this is but another chapter in an ongoing war with enemies that hide in plain sight.
Let your glory fill this place. Let your presence inhabit our worship and praise. Let your glory fill this place. Let your glory fill this place. Let your glory fill this place. Let your presence inhabit our worship and praise. Let your glory fill this place. As our reasonable service of worship, where your living sacrifice,